Now, if we had to change this world by sitting in the illusory physical and changing it in the physical, which doesn't exist, by sitting round a table and creating organizations and someone taking minutes, forget it. No chance. Just enjoy the rest of your life because it's over. But that's not the way we change the world. The world that we experience as collective reality is the sum total of human interaction between perception and possibility and probability. And that's why the world is as it is, and that's why they have to control our perceptions. They know all this deep in the shadows. Not the politicians, just pawns. I mean, deep in the shadows. They know that if they can control our perceptions of reality, of world events, yes, but crucially of self, then they're going to control the feedback loop and they're going to control the world we manifest. I've got no power. They have the power. They must look after us. Big Brother must save us. But if we, and so many more people are, but if more and more of us go through this process of perceptual transformation, we start to literally decode out of possibility and probability a new world. Because at the moment, we are existing in a world, in a reality, that is the holographic manifestation of human perception. If we change human perception from little me to infinite me, the world must change. Not only that, we will expand into levels of frequency that this manipulative force cannot operate in.
So we don't even have to go kill them. They just won't be able to handle our new perception.
Well, when anyone thinks that the way to change anything is to A, perceive an enemy, B, hate it, and C, kill it, that's what they're trying to do. The lowest of the low of perceptions. You know, this is why they want war, they want conflict, they want hate, because it holds us in a low frequency, thus low perceptual, thus low feedback state, and the world goes on as they want it. And, you know, one of the great ironies, God, there are so many, is that there are groups who are trying to have my events, my public events, banned. They call me a modern day hate preacher. When what I am saying is, and they call me anti-Semitic and racist.
That's what they do. They latch onto that and they call you anti-Semitic.
Exactly.
But you're saying you're not.
Well, of course not. I mean, how can someone who says, hey, race, religion, it's all an illusion. It's just an experience. We're all each other. I don't care if you're Jewish or Islamic or Chinese or wherever you are. It's just an experience of the same consciousness. Somehow, that is twisted, lied about, so that they have an excuse for saying we must silence him because he's a hate preacher. I am saying that hate is the way we got into this mess. I'm saying in the events they're trying to stop, love is the answer, not the love of physical attraction, which has become the way love has been misunderstood, but a love that understands we're all each other, and that fighting each other and hating each other is just confirmation of a complete misunderstanding of reality and the nature of self and who we are. But if you can't have someone silenced by telling people what they're saying, then say what they're not saying and justify it that way. And have you noticed this? I notice it all the time. Those groups that scream hate at people do it with hate in their face, hate in their eyes. You see, another great irony is that these groups, I'm not talking people in general, I'm talking these particular groups, what I call hate groups, and they are hate groups because their modus operandi is to get people like me hated by the public, thus they're hate groups. But what they're doing is pointing at me and saying racist. And I'm saying race is a hoax. Race is an illusion. Race is just an experience. And in the greater scheme of things, an absolute irrelevance. But those that are screaming that are obsessed with race. They completely self-identify with it. It totally consumes them. And once you see self-identify yourself with being a race, suddenly other races are there to be in conflict with you. It's all an illusion. And it's extraordinary that someone who has the philosophy that I have can be painted by these tiny hate groups in the way that I am. But this is what happens, you see. Again, we come back to the postage stamp consensus. We come back to giving your mind away. They go to venues and they say, this guy's going to say it's the Jews. He's going to deny the Holocaust. I never have. And when people have said to these groups, show where he's ever done that. Silence. And the other thing they won't do is debate with me. I've asked them. I've said, I'll take you all on in a debate. All you against little me, and we'll have a chat, we'll have a debate. No, they won't go there. Why? Because throwing mud and running is the way it's done, always has been done by groups like this. But what happens is they go to the venues, and the venues, they start to virtue signal. Well, part of it is virtue signaling, and part of it is fear of also being called racist by having me use their venue. And they pull. Not all of them, no, but they pull. And do you know, not only don't the venues come to me and say, actually, they're saying you're saying this. Are you going to say that? And the answer would be, no, they don't. Not only that, they don't even tell you. We had this is the crazy world we're going into, Brian.
Is this political correctness?
Yeah, political correctness and fear. People are frozen in fear of saying the wrong thing. It's destroying human discourse, thus destroying the interaction and sharing of information. It's being done on purpose. We had a launch for the book at Old Trafford, Manchester United's ground. And the reason we went there, supposed to be a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, was because the Lowry Hotel in Manchester had pulled the event where it was first on the very basis of what I've just said. We read about the fact that it had been cancelled in the media. And that's the other thing, the media play an extraordinarily important part in this. I'm looking on the internet when the Lowry Hotel in Manchester pulled that book launch. I'm seeing a headline in various newspapers on websites, including the Manchester Evening News, Coventry Telegraph, ITV television. Hate preacher David Icke's event cancelled by hotel. They had taken a press release from the hate groups, completely lying about me and my views, and repeated it. And I contacted them, and I said, before I call my lawyer, will you just send me all the evidence you have that the headline's true? Gone in minutes. 2-3 minutes, gone. Taking it down, because they have no evidence. It's repeating. But you see, even journalists are terrified of saying what they should be saying as journalists, which is, hold on a minute. What do you mean you want to stop this man having a public platform. Well, whatever happened to freedom of speech? He doesn't agree with what you're saying, but he's not trying to stop you speaking. He would never try to get a venue to stop you speaking because he believes in freedom of speech and free discourse. Why are you trying to stop him? What's your agenda? No. They just take their press release and repeat it. And what happened with Manchester United, it was bizarre, is they eventually started trying to get Manchester United to pull. And I don't think they would have managed it, because Manchester United said to us when we booked it, and they knew about the background, they said, "Oh no, we're too big. We don't bow to that pressure now. We're too big." When it was, yeah, okay. And I don't think at that point it would have done. On the morning, it was a Friday, recently. On the morning after the previous day, my son Jamie and the team that's been working on it, we're communicating with Manchester United staff, and all the preparations going ahead. On the morning, the local MP, a Labour MP called Kate Green, starts on social media because she's approached by these hate groups. And she says, yes, I'm not having this, basically. I'm going to call Manchester United. And she calls Manchester United, and they pull it. And another group involved was Kick It Out, which is an anti-racist group within football. But this is the point. Kate Green had no idea what I'm saying. She's never read a book. She's never heard me speak. She had nothing. The hate groups say, I'm going to say this, and I believe this, all of it is nonsense. And so she just takes it as read and repeats it to Manchester United. She contacts Kick It Out, an anti-racist group. Never read a book of mine. Don't know anything about me. But racism. And this is the other thing, anti-racist groups need to be very, very careful that they don't see racism everywhere where it's not, because it suits their reason for being. So Manchester United then cancel. We find out on social media. My son, who's been talking to them for months, goes out to Old Trafford to say what's going on. Not only will they not speak to him, they got the security to escort him off the premises. This is what you're dealing with. People have no idea what you're dealing with, just to literally have a platform to talk about the need to love each other, the nature of reality. It's absolute madness. But this is the crazy world we're in.
Is this the grand plan of the Illuminati, or is this just now the sheep acting like the sheep?
No. It's both.
Do you want to hear something crazy, David? I believe and agree with 90% of what you're saying. And over the past 6 years, I've had 400 of what I believe some of the greatest minds in the world sit in that chair. And many of the most advanced ones, including Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia, Dennis McKenna, who was a brother of Terence McKenna in the psychedelic movement, all come down to this conclusion: we are all one.
Yeah.
And when we can get away from these senses and contact our higher power and go to the love each other, that's how we can advance as a entity that we are human. The only part I'm not yet connected with your reality is that I think that the enemy is in ourselves, and it's not necessarily external that's making us do this. But once you get past your headlines, which are, you're in the hate groups, or, for me, the shape-shifting reptilians, what's underneath, you are very London real, David. You are very much congruent in the things that I believe. And it is about love, I believe, and about empowerment is what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's about remembering what we've been manipulated to forget, and this is the point that I would make in that area, Brian, that you say you're not going with yet. There is a reason why humanity has forgotten its true self. You described in what you just said how to empower ourselves. This force does not want humanity to empower itself. It wants humanity in a state of bewildered, confused, chaotic subservience. This is why the true nature of reality is so systematically suppressed, because once we remember, it's over. It's over. Therefore, the force which wants to enslave us for its own purposes has to keep us in ignorance of true self, because without that, it's got no power over us. It's a classic example of, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. This force is the one-eyed man. To control humanity, it has to keep us in a state of blindness. When we become the two-eyed, third-eyed consciousness that we are, it's over. That's why the control and the nature of our true self are connected, because one must stop us remembering that. This is what religion's about. Religion says you're little me, and big me is out there. And by the way, me with me collar and me hat and me frock, I know what big me wants. Therefore, listen to me, do what I say, and then you'll be fine. And if you look at religions, it's a program. It's a software program, I would describe it as. You say to a Muslim person, you're a Muslim, what does that mean? Oh, well, I go to the mosque and a man tells me what God wants me to do. Okay. And what will happen if I don't do what he says? And you? Well, I'm a Christian, what does that mean? Well, I go to the church and a man tells me what God wants and what will happen if I don't. You? Oh, I'm Jewish, what does that mean? Well, I go to the synagogue and this man tells me what God wants and what will happen if I don't. It's a program. It's pseudo-randomness. I see this all across the world. Pseudo-randomness. I also call them opposames. These are things with different labels that if you break them down, they all operate the same way. And religions are like that. They are a program. They have their same modus operandi. And it is you, little me. You subordinate to big me, and you are a blasphemer if you could dare suggest that you are an expression of big me. This is how it works. If you break it all down, it's all about holding us in a narrow, limited, little me state of self-perception, and it's being done systematically.
You mentioned the third eye earlier, and I want to ask you about psychedelics. Something we talked about 6 years ago, psychedelics like DMT and ayahuasca. And I've found, because I experienced them and I talked about that publicly, is that it's a way of connecting me into something, removing language, trying to remove a lot of my cultural programming. And it feels like I'm plugged into an information source that is either not tainted or less tainted by my download. Do you have any opinions or experiences with psychedelics, and do you disagree or agree with me?
Well, I've done psychedelics once. Again, very synchronistically. I reached the point, I'd written a book called Alice in Wonderland, the World Trade Center Disaster, which came out in 2002. I say demolishing the official story of 9/11. And as I was completing that, I said to people I knew, you know, if I'm going to go further into this and understand more, I've got to get out there and I've got to see this world from another level, not in some dream, you know, was that real or wasn't it, but where I can consciously experience it. Very short time afterwards, I got invited to go to the rainforest of Brazil near Manaus and speak and be with a group that was going to take ayahuasca, this rainforest plant. And I went, and I could have taken it 4 times, took it twice, and I've never done it before or since again. I've never felt the need, but the experience I had was absolutely transformative. And it basically was the key to opening up the reality that I've gone into in so many ways. Because I took it on the first night, and I had a 2-hour experience that was extraordinary. So a lot of paranormal things going on, like lights, strip lights coming on, with no one touching the light, you know. And I did that on my own with one other person who just oversaw it. But the second night, got a bigger dose, and tasted like licorice. And let me say, you know, some people have bad experiences on this stuff. I had an incredible experience. On the second night, this voice, as loud as mine is now, took a female form, started to describe to me the illusory nature of reality. And it went on for 5 hours. And the worst thing about it was my belly hurt from laughing, because this voice was describing the world as we perceive it and then explaining what it really was. And it was so funny. But the thing is that when the voice started out and came out of nowhere, it said, we're going to take you to where you come from and to where you will return so you better understand where you are. What? And then it said, and just repeated it about 3 or 4 times, all you really need to know is infinite love is the only truth. Everything else is illusion. And then it went through explaining the illusory nature of reality, how there was no physical. I mean, there was one line, I had instant recall of it afterwards, wrote it all down. One question that this voice said was, why do you fly in an aeroplane from A to B when you are A and you are B and everything in between? And it went on like this for hours. And what I did, I came back and I started looking at science and quantum physics, and I realized that if you put the dots together, they've already realized it's an illusion. And because it's energy, information, consciousness, and not solid, physical, this reality, it means that things like shape-shifting become explainable. Because when I talk about these hybrid bloodlines, they're actually hybrid information fields. And when I'm looking at you now, I am decoding your waveform field, and you, as I'm seeing, in the form that I'm seeing, exist here, right? Now, if you were a hybrid, one of these bloodlines, you could shift that other part of the hybrid field so that becomes the dominant one. Now, as the observer, I'm decoding that one. So here, you would be something that's not human. To my experience, you have physically, solidity, solidity, moved from one body to another. But no, the only place the shift goes on physically, illusory physically, is in the decoding processes of the observer. And, you know, one of the things that they've talked about for years, some scientists have, but now is becoming more and more accepted, is that this world, as we perceive it, only exists when we look at it, when it's observed. Because what they've found is, interestingly, that when something is observed, then you have the waveform collapse into a particle form. Now, I would go one step further and say it's not, this world doesn't exist as we see it when it's observed, but when it's decoded. And the act of observation, the act of focus triggers that decoding, that world. So this world as we perceive it literally only exists in the form that we perceive it when we decode it. And so you get, it's one of the things I talk about in the book. There was a book came out in the 1990s called The Holographic Universe, written by a guy called Michael Tolbert. Very interesting book. What he'd done, he went to mainstream scientists who were convinced that this world was holographic. And we hear a lot about this now. I was writing about it a long time ago, a lot about this, the world's holographic. But so we live in a holographic universe. No, we don't. We live in a waveform information universe. The hologram is what we decode the world into from that, like a computer decodes Wi-Fi onto what we see to what we see on the screen. Anyway, what one story in this book that Michael Tolbert tells was when his father had a stage hypnotist along for a party at his house. And he describes how this hypnotist had this man sitting in a chair like you, and I think his name was Tom, and he put him through the party tricks by manipulating what? Manipulating his perceptions. And therefore his reality changed. But anyway, at one point, he said to this guy, Tom, he says, when I bring you back to a waking state, you're not going to be able to see your daughter in the room. So then he leads the daughter to stand right in front of her father. So he's looking into her belly, right? So he then brings him back, apparently, to a waking state. And he says, can you see your daughter in the room, Tom? Tom's looking around. He says, no. She's here. Can't see her. The hypnotist goes behind the back of the daughter, puts his hand in the small of her back and said, I'm holding something, Tom. What am I holding? And Tom's going, well, you're holding a watch. Obvious to him. His daughter's between him and the watch. He said, there's an inscription on the watch, Tom. Can you read it? He peered forward. He read the inscription. His daughter's between him and the watch. You say that to a mainstream scientist. Load of rubbish. You know, a Richard Dawkins or whatever. Load of rubbish, load of rubbish. But it's so easy to explain. Everything in its base form is waveform. And we decode that into this reality. So his daughter is in waveform, not in his five-sense reality, in waveform. If he doesn't decode that waveform field into a holographic expression of it, reflection of it, then he won't be able to see her because she's not operating in his five-sense reality. What the hypnotist has done with the hypnotic suggestion is he has, in effect, firewalled Tom's brain from decoding that field. Everyone else in the room is laughing, shaking their heads, because they've not been through that cut-off, that blocking of her field being decoded. So to them, she's standing there in front of him in solid form, holographic form here. But he hasn't decoded that into holographic form. So in his five-sense holographic reality, she doesn't exist. And if she doesn't exist, he can see what's behind her. And this is, you see, when you get to looking at the world like this, and then you think that all the institutions that run the world and dictate human perception, education, academia, politics, journalism, on it goes. Medicine, science, apart from the cutting edge of it, they're all making decisions and they're all communicating how things are, postage stamp consensus, from the perspective of a reality that does not exist. This is why mainstream scientists like Professor Richard Dawkins, the kind of anti-alternative anything professor at Oxford University, that's why he waves away any alternative explanation of reality. That's impossible. Yes, Richard, mate, it's impossible if the world is solid. It ain't. It ain't. But because he's bought the illusion, and most of science has bought the illusion, then things become impossible. I remember the British government medical advisor, I think her name was Dame Sally Davis or something like that. I think she still is. She came out and said homeopathy was a nonsense, fakery basically, because she has no idea about reality. Like I say, the base form of everything in this reality is waveform information. And what they say about homeopathy is it's impossible to work because the potions are diluted until there's none of the original substance left. And because five senses say, can I see it, hear it, touch it, taste it, exactly, it exists or it doesn't exist, the substance is everything. The substance you can see, physical. There's an organization in Germany called the Aerospace Institute in Stuttgart, Germany, which has developed a way of photographing information in water. Fascinating. You can see videos of it on the internet. And what they did was they got this big tank of water and they put a flower in it and then took the flower out. and then photographed the droplets of water. And they found information from the flower in every droplet. And one of the things about holographic reality is every part of a hologram is a smaller version of the whole, so it's going to be in every droplet. And then they got people from the local community to come up, and they got another tank of water, and they got little dishes with their names on. And they got each of the people to take 4 droplets from the tank and put it in a dish with their name on. And then they photographed the droplets. What they found was that each 4 droplets were different from the other 4 droplets of everyone else, but the 4 droplets from each person were virtually identical. In other words, just taking a droplet of water and putting it in the dish had impregnated that person's energetic influence upon the water in terms of frequency, vibration, information. So what homeopathy is, when they dilute the substance until there's none of the substance left, what is left in the water is the waveform information of the substance, just like the waveform information of the flower was in the water droplets in the tank after the flower had been taken out. And it's the waveform of that substance which interacts with the waveform field of the body, and if it's done properly, can balance it out and bring about what we call harmony, the opposite of dis-ease, the opposite of illness. But because you see this chief medical officer who is making decisions about what people should have and vaccines and all this stuff, is absolutely clueless about the nature of reality itself, and thus waves away homeopathy on the basis of she doesn't understand how it operates, and therefore how it can work. And you find this with mainstream science everywhere. If they can't explain it, it can't be happening.
Right.
But when you look at complementary ways of treating the body, they're invariably waveform level treaters. Because if the waveform information field is in a balanced, harmonious state, then that which is decoded from it, which is just a reflection of that, the holographic reality we decode this waveform world into, must also be in a balanced, healthy state, because that's no more than that. That's a movie screen of that projector. And so people say about modern medicine and mainstream medicine, they never treat the cause, they always treat the symptom. But how can they treat the cause when the cause is in the waveform level of the body and they don't even accept that exists? All they're left with is treating the symptom, which is the projection of an imbalance in the waveform level in the holographic decoded version of reality. And so what humanity has been manipulated to do is look at the world, see how it would like to change it, but running around just the same as standing on the stage in a movie theater and screaming at the screen, demanding that it changes. This is waving your banner in a protest. Screaming at the screen, demanding the movie changes. Never going to change. It's hit the screen, it's a done deal. If you want to change the movie, you've got to change where the movie's coming from. Then you can change the movie. So what people have been manipulated into is even trying to change what they would like to change, but doing it in a way that it's impossible. You can't change a movie when it hits the screen. And therefore it's what manifests the movie that we need to change. And that comes down in the human experience to perception, which becomes the feedback loop, which becomes the movie screen.
Right. And I know you want to spend the next few years really going into that perception
big time,
level.
yeah.
And I want to hear about that. I just want to get your thoughts on Trump, the Trump phenomenon, and what you can tell about the rest of the world by looking at their reaction to Trump?
Well, Trump is the equivalent of a Hollywood actor on the movie screen. And the anti-Trumps people are other actors in the movie. And so humanities, those people that get caught in it, oh yeah, he's the baddie, he is. He's the baddie in this movie, that Trump, he's the baddie. Oh no, he's the goodie, he is the person I like, right? It's a movie. And while we are focusing on this, again, this minutiae of Trump, anti-Trump, left, right, and all this nonsense that we get caught into, Silicon Valley's doing what it is doing in terms of destroying freedom of information and driving on behalf of things like DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, this AI transhumanist agenda. It's a diversion. And you know, just a quick one, I talk about this hidden hand. These here today, gone tomorrow politicians are just that. Here today, gone tomorrow. What we need to look at is that which is always there, because that's where the power is. That's what pushes this agenda on, no matter who's in power, who's the president, what party, whatever. A quick example. In September 2000, an organization in America called the Project for the New American Century published a document calling for the American government to, quote, fight and decisively win multiple theater wars, to bring about a series of regime changes. And it named the countries that they wanted to regime change: Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, North Korea, China. The people who published that document included Donald Rumsfeld, who a few months later would be Secretary of State for Defense in the Bush administration, Paul Wolfowitz, who would be his deputy at the Pentagon, Dick Cheney, who would be de facto president under Bush for 2 terms, Dov Zakheim, who would control the entirety of the Pentagon budget in that same period. In that document in September 2000, they said that this process of transformation, all these regime changes, would necessarily be slow, this is the quote, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year to the month after that document was published, 9 months after the people that wrote it came to power in the Bush administration, the United States had, in September 2001, what Bush called at the time the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century. As a result of that, this process of regime change was triggered by the so-called war on terror justified by 9/11, which the official story of 9/11 is tragically laughable when you break it down and you see how the contradictions. Anyway, this is where I'm going in terms of the politicians and Trump. First man in, of course, officially, George W. Bush. They went into Afghanistan. Then, with Tony Blair lying about weapons of mass destruction, they went into Iraq. And the reason they lied about weapons of mass destruction is because Iraq was on this list of regime change. They didn't have an excuse, so they made one up. And by the way, let us not forget, people now, including even the mainstream media, accept that they were lied to over weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which led to a catastrophic invasion and the catastrophe that has followed. Let us not forget that the very same people, not the same agencies, the same governments, the same personalities that told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they knew they weren't, were the same people that gave us the official story of 9/11. Okay, so the list Iraq. Then they go into Libya, also on the list. But now Bush is gone, Blair's gone. Now it's Barack Obama. He's a Democrat, not a Republican. And it's David Cameron. He's a conservative, not the illusory of Labour, Blair. But now they're going into another one on the list.